was thinking the other day about some customers we had at a Harris+Hoole. We'd recently opened in a place called Ruislip, which is in northwest London, quite close to, say, Watford. This must be going on about 4 years ago now. These were a couple of local mums. They thought they'd poke their head in and see what all the fuss was about and try the fare. So we made them a couple of coffees. And it wasn't long before they returned those coffees, saying that they thought there was something wrong with the taste. They thought that maybe we hadn't properly rinsed out the cups of the dishwashing detergent because their coffees tasted a little bit like fairy liquid. Now, needless to say, there was nothing wrong with the coffee. There was nothing wrong with the cups. What they were likely tasting, probably for the first time, was a lightly roasted high-grade coffee that was probably highish in terms of the acidity and the sweetness, and lowish in terms of that ashy, charcoaly sort of burnt bitterness that they might have otherwise associated with coffee. Now, chuckle as we might at a story like this, amused as we are at the innocence and the ignorance of the chattering classes, there was something nonetheless decidedly prescient in this particular incident, because less than a year later, we had to close that store in Ruislip. We just weren't selling enough coffees. It would appear that everyone in Ruislip thought that we weren't properly rinsing out our cups of coffee. Anyway, for me at least, this story encapsulates one of the profound challenges faced by big money as it looks to dabble in the world of specialty coffee. Firstly, there's this challenge of breaching new markets, of convincing people to part with good money for what is essentially just frothy fairy liquid in a cup. The second challenge is how do you do this in a way that ekes out a financial return, ekes out a financial return from a specialty business model that it's almost as if it's conspiring against you making any money. And the third challenge was how do you do this all in a way that doesn't compromise on the artisanal ideals of specialty coffee. These were challenges we faced on a near daily basis at Harris+Hoole. My brother, sister, and I, we, up until that point, had been mucking about in specialty coffee in London and with a business called Taylor Street Baristas, and we found ourselves with this opportunity to work with big money, in this case, Tesco, to start up a brand new high street specialty coffee chain. Now, Tesco's ambitions at the time were big. They wanted to create they wanted to build a business to rival Costa in the UK, and indeed their ambitions were to go abroad at some point as well. And they'd seen some of the things that we were doing in specialty coffee, and they asked us just to help sort of give them a hand to get things started. So that's where I spent the next 3 years of my life, starting up this business called Harris+Hoole, and all along attempting to bridge the innate conflict between big money and specialty coffee. Because make no mistake, the gulf between big money and specialty coffee is a big one. On the one hand, you've got big money with its big is better obsession with scaling quickly, its fixation on financial returns. And on the other hand, you've got specialty coffee, this fiercely independent, with this geeky commitment to an utterly unscalable artisanal craft. One values money, and the other values the God shot. Never the twain shall meet. Some might say, actually, it's a conflict that's destined to destroy the very fabric of everything we hold so dear. You know, industrializing a craft, screwing over the farmers, commoditizing our very livelihoods. But all that to one side, throwing caution to the wind, and with a touch of reckless naivety, the three of us thought, bugger it, we'd give it a go. And so we got into bed with big money, we got into bed with Tesco, and we started up this little joint venture. And it should be said that we started up this joint venture with a very understanding joint venture partner. That's right, Tesco were an understanding joint venture partner, which may come as a surprise to anyone who knows Tesco. After all, they have a reputation for screwing over the little guy, for never leaving a penny on the table, for this sort of ruthless commercial savvy that leaves everything and everyone in its wake. But with us, at least, they were determined to try something different. try something new. They wanted to attempt this joint venture with a detachment and a distance, unlike any other sort of venture they'd attempted before. And their reasonings for this were several. But perhaps most pertinently for us today, the reasoning for this was this. They could see the innate market potential, indeed the disruptive market potential of specialty coffee. And to their credit, they understood that specialty coffee was only as good as the values that underpin it. And speaking frankly, I don't think they trusted themselves to be left alone with those values. They didn't trust themselves to be left alone with those values. Given the chance to buy cheaper coffee, or given the chance to underinvest in labour, whatever, they'd probably take it. Because the pressures that come to bear on even the most enlightened or visionary executives in a big machine, a massive machine like Tesco, that's beholden to the quarterly catcall of the city. You know, their intention was to try and put temptation out of their way. And so as a result, they put us a little bit pretty much beyond their reach, in much the same way that you might say lock up your money in a term savings account, or hide that chocolate at the back of a cupboard. The only two things that they asked of us were, firstly, that whatever we do it in such a way that we're able to scale the business quickly, nationwide. And secondly, that whatever we do, we're capable of, in some way, sort of generating a financial return in the long term. So, how did we do this? Well, we began by setting out the values of specialty coffee, defining those values, ultimately the values that would come to define the business. Indeed, the values that we felt go some way to explaining the growing consumer interest in specialty coffee in general. And to our mind, these values were threefold. There's quality coffee, investing people, and doing the right thing. Now, the challenge with a set of values like this is, how do you transfer them from a screen, or how do you transfer them from a piece of paper into the fabric, the DNA of your business? And how do you do that to a business that has ambitions to grow very big, very quickly? Because you know, the challenge for us wasn't about scaling the bricks and mortar of the business. Anyone could do that just by hiring enough builders. The challenge wasn't even around, say, sourcing enough coffee. We were working with a terrific roastery, union hand roasted, who had the operating scale and capacity to meet our needs. The challenge wasn't even around the training and development of our baristas. Again, with the right investment in a training infrastructure, even that's achievable. No, the challenge for us was, how do you scale a culture? How do you scale a culture? How do you scale that intangible je ne sais quoi, it's a very wanky way to say it. How do you scale that intangible thing that inspires your people to embody the things that you value as a business? How do you scale culture? Because it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter how much quality coffee you can put in your hoppers. It doesn't matter how much top-notch training you can give your baristas. If your people just don't care, you're going to get a shit cup of coffee every time. So for us, how did we put, say, quality coffee at the heart of our business? Well, we did this in a number of ways. We had a close working relationship with the union, as I mentioned, and this was supported by a very rigorous QC program with my brother, Andrew, at the helm. We had mystery shoppers that would rate or score the quality of their coffee experience, right down to the latte art in their cups. Our shop managers, they were even bonused based on the quality of the coffee that was coming out of their shops. They'd only receive a bonus if more than 90% of mystery shoppers rated their coffee above that of their nearest competitors. Everyone who joined the business had to do a one-week coffee training course before they were even allowed on the shop floor, and this was followed up with ongoing training. We had a coffee Olympics, kind of like an in-house barista championships, where we'd find baristas would be training day and night in the months in the lead up to this competition. Shop managers, again, they were bonused around the development of their people pay levels were linked to H&H qualifications that people earned through the business. We even reconceived the design of the coffee shop itself. We introduced this idea of open plan coffee bars that you can see here, kind of. This would allow customers to literally come and stand right next to the barista as he or she was preparing their coffee. And the reason we did this was because it would allow the barista to show off or to take pride in their craft, but more importantly, to take pride in their development as a barista and to reap the very real benefits of that investment. And thirdly, there was the idea of how did we sort of put doing the right thing at the heart of our business? Well, when it came to coffee, again, the working relationship with Union was really important there. Union, one of the world's pioneers in terms of direct trade. So we worked with Union to find some terrific projects at Origin that we could support with campaigns in store. But we also looked to entrench this value in the business through this idea of community activism. The business as a whole had a community champion. Every shop had its own community champion. We had a community council that would meet quarterly. The shop managers, they were bonus based on the quantity and the quality of the community engagement of their shops. And all of this served to promote this idea of doing the right thing, which to our mind at least spoke to the spirit of specialty coffee. But as successful as we were at ingraining these values into our business and in such a way that it was scalable, it would all count for nothing if we couldn't get the numbers to stack up. Because it doesn't matter what your values are. If you can't sell coffee to the mums of Ruislip, or if your values are just so costly to maintain that the whole thing actually just becomes a bit of a decadent and expensive exercise. So how did we tackle this? Well, firstly, we had to tackle the challenge of selling coffee to the mums of Ruislip, and selling specialty coffee, rather, to the mums of Ruislip. And the way we did this was by dropping the word specialty. We didn't use the word specialty. There are a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, specialty is intimidating. It's hard enough as it is to convince someone to cross the threshold of your shop in the first place, but if they think that when they do so, they're going to be confronted with an environment that's unfamiliar and unknown, and it's going to make them look like an idiot, then forget about it. We also found that specialty is meaningless. It may be a concept that's meaningful to us all here in this room, but you try and define something like the Q score in 10 words or less. And finally, specialty is fancy. I mean, to the mums of Ruislip, we found that a cappuccino is a cappuccino is a cappuccino. So let's just call a spade a spade. But even though we weren't necessarily using the word specialty, we nonetheless celebrated the values of specialty, which were, as I've mentioned before, this idea of focusing on quality, investing in people, and doing the right thing. And as it happens, these values are very much on trend in the wider consumer world. In fact, we're blessed to have a set of values that people intrinsically appreciate. We're lucky we're not in an industry that relies on screwing over the little guy or cutting corners or profiteering at all costs, like, say, banking. I mean, the benefit, the fact is that the set of values, that specialties values are inherently marketable. The values of specialty are inherently marketable, and we shouldn't forget this. But we also found that the values of specialty form this, almost like this virtuous cycle, where each value reinforces the other in such a way that it produces a positive customer experience. And what do I mean by that? Well, as this is some rather complicated slide up here, but essentially what it's saying is that the byproduct of investing in the things that make specialty coffee special is the kind of customer experience that most retailers would strive for. It's a quality product delivered by passionate people. Because when you invest in people, there are two outcomes. Firstly, as you'd probably expect, by investing in the training and development of someone, they're going to produce a better quality product. But we also found that by investing in the training and development of someone, their engagement in the business increased, and the discretionary effort that they would apply to their day-to-day increased. And in a similar way, By doing the right thing, we also found that this had two outcomes. The first outcome was it allowed us to produce a better quality product, as any proponent of direct trade will tell you, that by working more closely with farmers and paying a higher price at the gate, that we see a corresponding increase in the quality of the green. But doing the right thing also had the benefit, this ancillary benefit, of increasing engagement of our people with the business, because study after study shows that we're all likely to be happier and we're all likely to be more engaged with our jobs if we feel like we're doing something meaningful with our days. So in summary, even though we weren't necessarily screaming about specialty coffee, the values of specialty coffee were nonetheless very much a core part of our brand and our positioning, and actually were critical in driving our customer proposition. And the results were encouraging. When we left H&H in September of last year, we had 46 shops, all of which had been opened in under 3 years. We had like-for-likes at the time of around 10%, which I think were amongst the highest, if not the highest, of any high street coffee chain. Our NPS, which is Net Promoter Score, like a proxy measure for the customer experience, that was an order of magnitude north of any other high street coffee operator. So there's something that we were doing that was clearly working. But it doesn't matter how, well, I mean, it does, but it's one thing to be able to get people through the door. It's one thing to be able to generate revenues in your business, but the challenge for us now was how do we get the rest of the economic model to sort of stack up? Because as you know, running a specialty cafe is expensive. I mean, firstly, our labor costs are a good deal higher than anyone else because of all the investment we need to put into the training. Don't even get me started on the cost of coffee. It's probably 2 or 3 times what we're paying, what a Costa or a Nero or a Starbucks is paying. And the result is a specialty cafe business model that is, it's almost like it's structurally conspiring against the idea of making any money at all. So what did we do? Well, I suppose we did what any other business owner would do. Framed by our values, we looked to make incremental gains throughout the P&L, throughout the business model. And so, for example, we worked very closely with our food operations team and ordering processes to try and minimize wastage. We worked very closely with labor scheduling to try and better manage our payroll. We threw every merchandising trick of the book to try and increase food sales and impulse sales. We even sort of through better planning and design were able to cut our fit out and construction costs by something like 40%. And the result of this all was essentially a business that was not only scalable, but also profitable at a shop level too. So, how did it all end? Well, for me, I suppose not that great. I mean, some of you will know, a couple of years ago, Tesco had a change in senior management, and there was a strategic shift away from their adventures with businesses like Harris+Hoole, and so as a result, we left. But it's hard not to reflect on my experience, and indeed the experience of big money and specialty coffee in general, in a positive way. I mean, there's no question that more people are drinking specialty coffee now than there were, say, 5 years ago. And you'd have to say that a big part of this is because of increased investment in the sector. In addition, it feels like there's more, technology and innovation has accelerated in recent times. And again, you know, a big part of that has got to be due to the participation of big money, at least in part. And consistent with this, I just feel like there stacks more players, stacks more innovation up and down the value chain, which must be of benefit to just the economics of doing business in specialty coffee for everyone, from the farmer through to the cafe operator, through to the customer himself. But I think, for me, the point at which I realized that big money's dance with specialty coffee was a beneficial one was the day I walked into a Tesco in a place called Broadstairs, which is it's the arse end of Kent, and there I was able to have a flat white, which I think was as good a coffee as I would have had 10 years ago when I first started out in specialty coffee in London. Now, to my mind, at least, that's got to be a good thing. Thanks very much.